I'm Faiz Shakir.
And I'm Amanda Litman. Our guest this week on Battleground is Jamal Raad, co-founder and executive director of Evergreen Action.
We are too late in the process that we can just do one thing and solve this.
Jamal Raad, welcome to Battleground. Jamal, why don't you explain who you are to our audience?
My first job out of college was working on Jeff Merkley's campaign for the U.S. Senate in 2008. Later, I was communications press secretary for Senator Merkley in D.C., where I knew Faiz and worked on issues like the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and filibuster reform. Since then, I've been working for Governor Jay Inslee. I did his reelect in 2016 and worked on his climate-focused presidential campaign to 2019. And since then, I've started with a few of the folks from the Inslee campaign, a climate-focused political policy and advocacy shop named Evergreen Action, and I'm its co-founder and executive director.
Well, let's start right there and let's get into it. Jamal, there's obviously an ongoing debate around climate. I've heard a number of progressives say no climate, no deal in reference to the infrastructure bill. I guess I start from a position of if there's no climate, no deal, and I agree with that. What is the climate and what is the deal? What is the climate deal that we need to get to?
When Ed Markey a few weeks ago tweeted no climate, no deal, our partners the Sunrise Movement and us quickly bought noclimatenodeal.com and used it as a organizing tool to both catalog the senators that have said similar statements and highlight their efforts, and then give folks an opportunity to reach out to their members of Congress to urge them to also say no climate, no deal. So I do want to give a little plug for noclimatenodeal.com. But yes, it is incumbent upon us as climate advocates to communicate what does need to be in a possible reconciliation bill to meet the moment and do what the science demands. I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be able to get some really big things done in the reconciliation bill. What we're hearing is that there will be something akin to a clean electricity standard, 100% clean electricity by 2035, which is kind of the real core piece in the Biden climate agenda. We're going to see hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy tax incentives, which are pretty crucial to ramping up renewables. And we're going to see a civilian climate corps, which is something that the youth climate movement has been really excited about. It'll create good paying jobs doing work in their communities, but also create a pipeline of talented folks that are trained to do these clean energy jobs of the future, which I'm really excited about. That's not all that needs to get done. One thing that I haven't heard is in it that does need to be in there is fulfilling Biden's commitment to get rid of all fossil fuel subsidies. If we are discussing paying for this, it should be a no-brainer to get rid of all fossil fuel subsidies. So anyways, that's quick, long, the short of it of what we kind of need to see coming out of this bill.
What's the line? At what point is it not enough climate, no deal?
It's actually talking about concrete emissions reductions. And it's are we meeting our environmental justice commitments that we made in the campaign last year? 40% of the investment going to communities, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities that have been hit first and worst by this crisis, that have borne the brunt of pollution, and their communities have been treated like dumping grounds by fossil fuel companies.
We're talking about saving the planet. We have to reduce carbon emissions, and there's really kind of no other way to save the planet. Are tax credits enough to do the carbon emissions reduction that we want? Can you talk a little bit about that? Why we as a progressive community focus on this kind of tax credit as being so critical to it?
Yeah, the main driver of climate policy for decades was a carbon tax or a cap and trade system that were holistic, system-wide approaches to defeating the climate crisis. That was Waxman-Markey, the climate approach that we took a dozen years ago. It failed, and we've tried making progress in states on those issues, and we haven't made much progress. I think that there's been a shift in both the policy and politics around climate in the last few years. On the policy, it is that we are now taking a sector-by-sector approach to taking on carbon emissions. There are three major drivers of carbon emissions: our electricity sector, our buildings, our homes and our commercial buildings, and our transportation sector. And so we are taking an investment and standards approach to decarbonizing each of these most polluting sectors of our economy. The main being the clean electricity standard, the idea that we need to get to 80% clean by 2030, 100% clean by 2035. And if we clean up our electricity sector and then make our transportation sector and our building sector run on that clean grid, then we can get a lot of the way there, if not the whole way there, on meeting some of the near-term carbon reduction targets.
We are trying to build a market-based approach that would incentivize the direction of this. And obviously, we want it to be, in some sense, mutually beneficial to all parties, that we want to move towards a clean energy economy where the business community and consumers all feel like, hey, this is the right way to go. But the concern would be that you don't get there fast enough, that the climate hinges on us creating tax credits, incentives to move in this direction. But what happens if that isn't enough?
I get a question all the time, like, what's the most important thing here on climate? What issue? Is it the tax credits? Is it the standard? Is it the Civilian Climate Corps? Is it executive action? And I tell everyone this, we are too late in the process that we can just do one thing and solve this. We have to do them all, and even then, we're just minimizing the worst impacts of climate change. We need to take an all the above climate policy approach. We don't have the luxury of choosing. We need to kind of see what sticks. We don't know what will pass muster with the courts. We don't know what it will eventually be politically sustaining. Those are all guesses. And so we need, in this kind of crucial moment right now, while we have control of Congress that is fragile, while we have the executive, we need to be all systems go on, frankly, everything. I think that there's a real chance that this summer becomes the summer where everyone acknowledges that climate change is no longer a chart or a graph or happening in some far off future. It's happening now in communities across America.
Why has this fallen by the wayside for the Democratic Party for so long, up until the last couple of years?
Well, I do think that part of the story of the last couple of years is climate's rising prominence within the Progressive Coalition and the Democratic Party as far as as an important issue. We've seen the polling that it's risen up there with healthcare as a top issue for Democrats. We've seen the rise of groups like the Sunrise Movement and youth climate strikers really bring this to the fore. But we've also seen the actual effects of climate change now visceral in people's lives. I'm here in Seattle, where we had the hottest temperatures ever a couple weeks ago, 108 degrees in the city of Seattle, a city that only 42% of homes have air conditioners. We weren't built for this, nor were our homes. I think that there's a real chance that this summer becomes the summer where everyone acknowledges that climate change is no longer a chart or a graph or happening in some far off future. It's happening now in communities across America. Part of the reason why climate has not been as crucial of an issue or as central of an issue in the past is that it's been so esoteric and like complicated, and we needed it. And I think the climate community has done a better job of it recently, is like really telling it as a job creation opportunity, that it not only is there peril, but there's promise of a clean energy revolution, that we need to tell a more positive story, and how people's lives will concretely improve if we take on this problem. And I think we could do a better job of that, but I think that that's part of the reason why it's become a more central issue.
Climate politics. Really painful conversation, Jamal. I mean, we've been having it for too long. So the impacts are right there in your face in a very clear and stark way. And yet you do have Senator Ron Johnson and others literally saying they still deny climate change, the reality of climate change. And I'm just grappling, how is that possible? Give me a sense of how you understand the politics of climate change within the Republican Party.
Well, I believe Ron Johnson said it was bullshit.
I think climate change is, as Lord Moncton said, okay. And by the way, it is.
Yeah, though it's it's actually more craven than what you were describing, even in that, like, take for example the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It has money for resilience, but not actual any carbon reductions, because Republicans will acknowledge that it's changing their communities and that they need to do something about it, but only to the fact of like raising roads and sidewalks.
Right. So when you say resilience, it's climate resilience such that we basically mitigate the impacts of when climate change hits. So we do some stuff to say, oh yeah, maybe your building won't get flooded when the flooding comes, but we're not going to do anything, to your point, of actually addressing climate change by reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah. I like to call it Florida Republican climate policy. Because it's literally just the folks that will acknowledge that perhaps we need to build like a seawall because apparently the sea is rising. We're not totally sure how or why, but it's happening. So we should fund that. But to actually make sure that the sea doesn't rise any further, or go the opposite direction, no, not interested. It's just important to acknowledge that the Republicans are in bed with the fossil fuel industry, and that they're not going to do anything that will take on the fossil fuel industry's profits and bottom line, and that they're just not legitimate partners in this. Any deal with them is not going to actually take on what we need to do what the science demands.
But what is it that drives this kind of anti-science passion of saying, no, screw what the scientists tell us, screw what the health experts tell us. We're going to do it our own way because freedom or something.
I don't fully understand the Republican psyche on that. And if you do, let me know. But I should say that according to polling from our partners at Data for Progress and other places, that there is widespread support for ramping up renewables and transitioning off fossil fuels, and for policies like a clean electricity standard and a civilian climate corps. These are widely popular and have widespread support across parties. And so, yes, there's going to be some folks that are going to yell and scream and deny the need to act until the end. But I do think that polling has suggested that this is rising in concern, and that it's not exactly partisan on some of the support of some of these key policies.
When you look around the world, Jamal, how's the United States stacking up? Obviously, trying to address climate change cannot be a U.S. solo solution. That needs to be done in concert with a hell of a lot of countries. What are you seeing both on the positive and the negative side around the world?
Well, I think we're seeing actually a lot of action the last few days on this. We're seeing new policies come out that China is pursuing a cap and trade program for their electricity sector. We're seeing the European Central Bank consider climate risk a major issue that they're going to factor into their policies and work. I think that the international community is stepping up, that they want America to take a leadership role in this, that they want that after Trump and 4 years of federal inaction, that they want President Biden to step up, and hopefully he comes to Glasgow with a reconciliation bill and proof that we're moving on this.
What are all the different tentacles of the fossil fuel network in influencing public policy?
Yeah, it brings to mind Kate Aronoff's story in the New Republic yesterday of Exxon funding a lot of even the centrist think tanks, six-figure checks to help impact the conversation. So it's literally not just direct donations to politicians. It's funding interest groups. The Brookings Institution was mentioned. I believe the Bipartisan Policy Center was mentioned as folks that take money from the fossil
Bipartisan Policy Center. Oh man, that sounds like a great home for innovation and ideas. Why would they be taking money from fossil fuel, Jamal?
Yeah, I think that Exxon is trying to fund basically. I consider what Exxon and other fossil fuel companies do when they engage in climate politics to kind of be a three-card Monte type situation, where the policy they support is always under the other cup. Oh, you support a carbon tax now. Well, we do not support that. In fact, oil companies spent over $30 million in 2018 to defeat a Washington state measure to put a tax on carbon. But now that we've moved on to a standards-based approach, they're now saying they support a carbon tax. Frankly, they're never going to support the current push of policy because that does not behoove their bottom line. And so they're not good faith actors in this fight. And I'm not telling you something you don't know.
They want to cut the deal saying that we Republicans want Joe Biden to increase the gas tax. We'll cut the deal with you. But then when you do it, in 2022, you will definitely see Joe Biden broke his pledge not to raise taxes on low-income Americans. And he passed a gas tax because they compelled him to do so. That's what they want to do.
This is not on the level. They do not want to strike a deal. And the fact is, I'm pretty dubious that they ever find the 5 other votes for the bipartisan deal that leads to us not being able to eventually do the reconciliation bill we need that will actually have the progressive priorities we need to pass. This is the most pivotal time in climate politics these next few months. And so if you were ever considering engaging or activating around climate, I would seriously hope you consider doing so right now.
There has been I don't know if it's interesting, but a debate happening online among some of sort of like thought leaders about whether the climate activist movement, Evergreen, Sunrise, et cetera, which are focusing primarily on pressuring Democratic electeds and, protesting Joe Biden on climate issues, whether that's the right tactic or whether it's a waste of time.
The climate policies we're pursuing right now are deeply popular. There's a great op-ed from Danielle Dice-Roth and Marcella at Data for Progress over the weekend in the Hill about how the inclusion of clean energy programs makes the overall infrastructure bill more popular. So I think that folks like the Sunrise Movement and others in the Climate Coalition are doing the right thing. They're pressuring the folks that they helped get elect to do the right thing and to meet the moment. And that's what we should be doing.
The answer is not, is what Sunrise or Evergreen or any of these other groups doing a waste? It's that, what else? It's just, I even think not enough. And in fact, maybe not the only part of the solution. I think what the Sunrise teens, such as they are, have been doing and the like is incredible. And we also need more media covering climate issues. And we need to combat Republicans who are not engaging on the level. And we need to elect Democrats on the state and local level who can pass meaningful climate legislation where the federal government might fail. And we need global action. It is the kind of thing where I think trying to argue that it's not the right strategy ignores the fact that it's not happening in a vacuum. And the answer is, in fact, yes, and for all of this.
There's not one weird trick that solves the climate crisis. It's not like, oh, you're doing it wrong. If you do it this way, that's going to really just unpack this and really get home to voters. It needs to be a bunch of people trying a bunch of different things, both on the policy front and on the communications front. I think that there needs to be people talking about peril, and I think there needs to be people talking about promise. And we need people not only agitating for action, but communicating solutions. And so we need all of it.
And I think one of the things the Republican Party has done admittedly pretty well in this is turn some of the fight about climate into a culture war. I think about the paper straws, which God, I hate paper straws, but like the use of paper or metal straws, the Democrats don't want you to eat meat anymore. That becomes a symbol of a cultural identity as opposed to a scientific fight or even a political fight, which makes it often much harder, I think, for Democrats to engage in.
Yeah, well, and anything that really casts the blame on you, the individual, as the source of the problem is bad politics and just wrong. You are not the problem, you and your home, because it was before you bought it or before you rented it, had natural gas, fracked natural gas flowing through it, does not make you the problem. It is our whole system. It is the fossil fuel industry pouring billions of dollars to ensure that nothing changes. It is not like, I would hope that you recycle, but it's not, because you don't recycle, is not the reason why we have climate change. It's, you using, I hate those fucking paper straws.
They disintegrate. They're so bad.
They disintegrate. They're terrible. And they're not the linchpin to solving this thing.
No.
And I, and that's the problem though with also the media literacy piece of this. We had questions in the debates about personal responsibility on climate, and like Cory Booker being asked about his veganism, and it's just like, that is not the crux of the issue. And in fact, the fossil fuel companies would love for the focus to be on your own personal carbon footprint. In fact, they run little trackers on there, and they do promoted tweets asking you to check your carbon footprint. That's what Exxon would like that. BP would like that. It's not, we have a systemic problem that needs collective action.
My friends make fun of me a lot because I did not grow up recycling. I grew up in a part of Virginia where to recycle, you had to drive your recycling half an hour to the other side of town. That didn't make sense to me or my family. But as I often tell them, like, the best thing I can do for climate is, live in a city, not drive a car, and vote for Democrats. It's pretty good, all things being considered. It does, the personal responsibility piece makes me a little batty. So I'm very glad you pointed out that discrepancy here.
Exit question here, Jamal, as we wrap. What keeps you optimistic? I mean, we're about to head into a reconciliation debate and hopefully take the necessary climate actions to at least put us on the path of doing something for this planet to save it. And I just wonder, leaving the audience with kind of a note of what they can do and what keeps you inspired.
I was just really happy yesterday to see the Senate Budget Committee speak in one voice that they were going to try to go bold in this reconciliation bill. Do we need to hold them accountable? Yes. Do we need to call our members of the House and Senate that no climate, no deal? We need a strong clean energy standard. We need robust clean energy tax incentives. We need a civilian climate corps. We need to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. Yes, we need to do all of that. We have not been in this opportunity in a dozen years since Waxman Markey. This is the most pivotal time in climate politics these next few months. And so if you were ever considering engaging or activating around climate, I would seriously hope you consider doing so right now. I think that we are on the precipice of doing something big. It will not be enough. It will never be enough. There's so much more we need to do. There's things that we haven't figured out yet, like how we're going to decarbonize certain industrial areas of our economy that, frankly, we don't have the answers to. And so, but figuring those things out will then be our luxury, is that'll meant that we've made some progress and that we've passed something meaningful in the next few months. And I think we can do it if we all stick together, if the caucus sticks together. I do think that we can get something really big done in the next few months.
Jamal, thank you for joining us on Battleground. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. You can get the full episode of Battleground on the Recount, streaming daily, or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.